Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. Dr. David Rabin, a board-certified psychiatrist and translational neuroscientist, is the Chief Innovation Officer, co-founder and co-inventor at Apollo Neuroscience, and has been studying resilience and the impact of chronic stress in humans for over a decade. Dr. Rabin has also organised the world's largest controlled study of psychedelic medicines in collaboration with colleagues at Yale, the University of California, Mount Sinai, Modern Spirit and MAPS to determine the mechanisms of the dramatic therapeutic benefits observed following psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy in treatment-resistant mental illness. Dr. David Rabin, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Ali. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Look, today I'd really like to learn all about this new wearable, and apparently it upgrades your body instead of just tracking it. And it's fascinating to me because up until now we've interviewed people like the CEO of Aura and Whoop, and so we understand a lot about wearables, but I've never heard of a wearable that actually upgrades your body. So before we delve into that, though, can you just give us a bit more of a background on to how you got to developing such a wearable?
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it. So I'm a psychiatrist and a neuroscientist, and I spend most of my time seeing patients focused on treatment-resistant post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, depression, anxiety, and substance use disorders. And I'm also an MDMA trained psychotherapist, which is now the current leading medical treatment that is in phase 3 FDA trials for PTSD. And what I found that was very, very interesting and consistent, not only with the patients I was seeing in my office that I was mostly doing therapy with, but also with patients that have gone through the MDMA trial for PTSD, which to date has shown the best results for treating PTSD out of any medicine, which 2 months after the 12-week therapy session with MDMA, with just 3 medicine sessions, 52% of people are no longer meeting symptom criteria for PTSD diagnosis. And what's really interesting is that 5 years after this, the 12-week therapy and 3 trials of medicine are done, we see that 67% of people are maintaining symptom remission from PTSD. So what's particularly unique about these medicines is that people are learning an enormous amount from the treatment sessions that is actually continuing afterwards, even though the treatment has stopped. And that's a completely different paradigm for the way that we treat mental illness currently, which is where we recommend that somebody take one or multiple medicines 1 or multiple times a day to maintain symptom relief consistently. They have to take the medicines every day. And that's what we're taught as psychiatrists and doctors to tell them. And so it's very interesting now that we may have options coming about that can help people achieve continuous improvement in their symptoms over time, even though the treatment has actually stopped. And one of the key factors that allows that to happen, allows the dramatic healing to occur, particularly in these folks who have had treatment-resistant illness for 10 to 17 years or more in the trials that I was mentioning, is that the critical factor to their recovery is safety. And when they feel safe in the office, they're able to make dramatic changes in their behavior and in their way that they interpret feelings and their mood. And however, when they leave the office, go back into the real world, they're surrounded by a lot of the things that trigger them again. And it makes them more likely to fall back into old habits and relapse, or old coping strategies, and that lead to relapse of symptoms. And so where Apollo came from was understanding what the body looks like physiologically, what happens to the heart rate, the breathing rate, the heart rate variability, which is a sign of resilience and balance in the nervous system, what happens to your blood pressure and your thoughts, et cetera, when you're feeling good versus when you're feeling stressed out versus when you're in a full recovery state, sleeping or meditating, et cetera. And understanding that the body actually looks very similarly no matter what you're doing to enter a recovery state, whether it's meditation, deep breathing, biofeedback, float tanks, yoga, et cetera, the body seems to look very similar in those situations. And similarly, the body look similarly when you apply soothing, gentle touch or soothing, gentle music, and the changes happen very quickly without you as the individual having to do much to achieve those balanced states. And so, from the understanding of a large amount of literature studying people doing deep breathing, meditation, biofeedback, etc., we now know that the body has these common states that it enters when we enter recovery. And so Apollo was developed to use the information about recovery that we are now getting from biometric wearables like Aura and Whoop, which tell us about our heart rate and our heart rate variability and our sleep and activity and these kinds of things, and then translate that information into a therapy that you can wear that delivers gentle, layered frequencies of vibration to the skin that kind of feels like an ocean wave, or an animal purring on your body that helps induce rapid states of calm very quickly within minutes, and for some people instantaneously, and then teaches the body over time to access these states more readily and more effectively. And so over time, using the input data from either the way you use our device, the Apollo, or the way you use your phone, or any number of other biometric wearables like Apple Watch or a Ring, we can show you how your body is changing in response to this frequencies that we're sending you. And so literally you can watch your body being upgraded in terms of your biometric and behavioral data, but you can also feel it based on the effects that we've shown in our clinical trials that the frequencies deliver to the body. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So can you give us a bit of maybe take us through a day of what it might look like and how it would actually function?
Yeah, that's a great way to describe it. So, and I think the main reason is because what Apollo does best is it helps restore our natural rhythm, our natural circadian rhythm, which is our sleep and wake and activity cycles. And so, in our day-to-day lives, people like us who are very busy have a rhythm that is very stress-driven, very activity-driven. And so the natural rhythm of waking up to the sun and waking and falling asleep to sunset gets thrown off quite a bit. And we, things like noise pollution, light pollution, screens and being in places where we're surrounded by lots of interactivity kind of throws that rhythm off for many of us. And so what Apollo does is it restores that rhythm by sending signals to the body that help the body recognize that it can adjust more easily to whatever state you'd like to go into. So practically speaking, the way that this works for most people is when they wake up in the morning, instead of drinking a cup of coffee or having a stimulant or a caffeinated beverage, they'll turn the Apollo on to a wakeful frequency, which gets you energized. And you can schedule it even so that by the time that if you schedule it, say I want to wake up at 7:30 in the morning, then it will around 7, it'll start to gradually ramp your energy up. So by the time you open your eyes in bed at 7:30, you're actually ready to get out of bed and there's no resistance. You won't find yourself saying, oh, why do I have to get out of bed right now? You'll be energized and ready to go. Similarly, in the middle of the day when people tend to have an afternoon slump, post lunch, and you don't want to drink any caffeine or take anything that would disrupt your sleep, people are using Apollo to increase focus and increase wakefulness in the afternoon so that they can continue to maintain their steady workflow throughout the day, and then without taking in additional things that might throw off your sleep. And then at night, instead of drinking alcohol or taking a sedative to help you fall asleep or any kind of sleep medicine, people will either manually turn on an Apollo frequency that helps wind your energy down so that by the time you hit the pillow, you're ready to fall asleep, or you can schedule the same thing. If you have a particular time you like to go to bed, it can know that automatically and gradually wind you down so that by the time you hit the pillow, you're actually ready to close your eyes and fall asleep, and you're not lying there waiting for your mind to slow down. And so over time, as you practice using the Apollo in this way, which induces a very similar effect in the body as if you were a master meditator or deep breather, the body learns to adjust to this rhythm, which is actually closer to our natural rhythm rather than the rhythm that we have become accustomed to in modern society, which is oftentimes based on self-medication with stimulants and sedatives to help us accomplish what we need to during the day. At the same time, that sort of throws off our natural state, and then ultimately leads us to have these periods where we are too amped or too energized, and then we crash. So it kind of avoids that whole that whole irregularity in our rhythms. But I think ultimately the true testament of how Apollo is working is that as we've tested this on over 2,000 folks in the wild, and what we see is that people regularly tell us that they're drinking less caffeinated beverages in the morning or taking less stimulants like amphetamines for ADD or ADHD, and then in the afternoon they're drinking less caffeine, and so they're able to manage their energy better. And then at night they're taking less sedatives and drinking less alcohol and sleeping better. And using things like the Oura Ring and the Apple Watch and Whoop, people are tracking their benefits and showing that without a doubt, as they integrate Apollo into their lives, they see consistent benefits as to their sleep and their heart rate variability, which is a sign of recovery in the body.
Right. So the Apollo doesn't actually track. So you can't sort of replace, say, the Whoop or the Oura with the Apollo to actually do the tracking as well?
So the Apollo's main focus is not tracking because what we've shown in our laboratory studies, our double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial, is that we can and are reliably shifting people's biometrics and shifting their attention and their energy levels. And now we've seen this replicated in our over 2,000 use cases in the wild of people testing the technology. Ultimately, we have built in basic tracking, which tracks, which is a positional accelerometer into the Apollo, so that will track your activity level during the day as well as your circadian rhythms at night. So it'll track your sleep and wake cycles, which is the thing that people tend to use Apollo for the most. So as you use it, it will show you how your sleep quality is changing and how your activity levels are changing over time. But that said, we didn't want to make it inconvenient for you to see benefits from other biometrics you might be using, because a lot of people who use Apollo also use Oura Rings and Apple Watches and Whoop and things like that. And so in the beginning, what will happen is data that comes in from your Oura Ring or your Apple Watch will actually be able to be displayed in the Apollo app. And so you'll see that on the same screen in your Apollo data screen, and will show you as you use Apollo, you can see how your biometrics that are collected from other devices are improving. And so you can actually track them over time. The first version of the Apollo, though, will not track biometrics because as we found from our studies, it's not necessary to get the benefits from Apollo. So it makes it much easier to use to just have a single interface where the Apollo delivers the intervention. And if you want to track your data in addition to that, then you can use another biometric wearable that can track detailed data. But the only thing that we really need to learn about you and then to begin to allow the Apollo's AI system to customize to you to deliver the frequencies when you want them and the frequencies that work the best for you is the data from how you use our app, how you use our device, and how you use your own phone. Because we found that the way you use your phone is actually one of the best predictors of how you're feeling at any given time. So using that data, for example, how hard you tap your screen, how much screen time you have, the kinds of the times you use your phone, things like that, what apps you're using, all of that gives us valuable information that doesn't require a biometric wearable. I think it's also important to note that biometric wearables are still young. And while they are fascinating, there's still a lot of work to be done to improve the accuracy of the data that's coming in. So focusing on positional accelerometry, which is one of the longest running and most well-studied biometric variables, we can use that and the cell phone data to predict most of what we need. And then over time, the Apollo app will actually grow to learn about you and start to integrate more and more data. More and more data sources that improve your user experience with the same hardware that you had from the beginning.
It sounds fascinating. So, Dr. David, just to clarify, let's say, for example, that afternoon slump that you always hit, say, at 3:00.
Sure.
You can set how many different functional frequencies are there, and what are the choices, and which one would you choose for, say, that afternoon one?
So I think we have 7 major categories, and when you open your app on the main screen for Apollo, it says, I want to wake up and energize, be clear and focused, social and open, which is more of like the social flow, pro-socializing frequency, and then recovery from physical or mental stress, And then the last three categories are sort of more calming and relaxing. One of them is enhanced meditation. One of them is enhanced relaxation. And the other one is enhanced sleep. And so those are the 7 categories that we generally identified from our users that are the most useful to people, and the states that are the most that are at these core transitions periods that are the most difficult for people to access, which is really changing from one energy level to another. So in the afternoon, as an example, what we hear from our users is that people are using the clear and focus frequencies at the in between 3 and 5 p.m. Most days. People who are beta testers, they'll turn on either the clear and focus frequencies, or they'll turn on, which give you some energy but also calm focus. And then the other alternative for that would be if someone is really dragging and they really need to wake up, they could turn on an energizing wake up frequency, which is much more stimulating and gets the body really going, kind of like drinking a cup of coffee. But the difference is that it wears off in about 2 hours max. So you don't have to worry about it disturbing your sleep later.
And what sort of physical effects? I'm trying to imagine, because unfortunately I haven't got my hands on one yet. I believe that they're not quite out yet. But what sort of physical effects do you feel from that? Like, you're wearing the watch, does it start pulsating or?
Yeah, so the feeling is a gentle vibration that is just barely noticeable. It feels a lot like an ocean wave. If you can imagine the feeling of being at the beach and you're sitting in the sand and you feel the waves lapping up against the sand near you, that feeling of the waves is very similar to the way that the Apollo waves were curated, because that frequency is a very natural frequency that induces pretty profound and rapid states of calm in the body. They feel like slightly different things to everyone, but the most common reports that we get are kind of feeling like a gentle ocean wave or like a purr. And I think generally what you feel is what we associate with these states normally. So we actually originally modeled the frequencies after I focus a lot of my practice on addiction psychiatry. And so almost all of my patients, even if they don't have a primary diagnosis of addiction, so their primary diagnosis might be depression, anxiety, or PTSD, oftentimes by the time they're seeing me, they have already begun self-medicating with other things, whether it's alcohol, caffeine, stimulants, or cannabis, or some other medicine. And so to get relief, because they're not getting relief from the medicines that they're being prescribed as it is. And so what Apollo was in a lot of ways designed to do was to replicate the effects of the subjective effects that people get when they would drink a coffee when feeling tired, or when you would take something to stimulate your attention, like an amphetamine, when you're not only feeling tired but also unfocused. And so, or similarly, having a drink or taking ingesting some cannabis when you're trying to get ready to fall asleep. Those feelings across thousands and thousands of users from the literature, and we know this to be the case because these medicines have been around for a very long time. And so what we did is we looked at, what does the body look like in those states? What does the heart rate typically look like when you take caffeine or amphetamine? What does the blood pressure look like? What does your breathing rate look like? And what's the speed and the rate of your thoughts? And then we try to replicate that effect by sending a frequency to your body that your body would naturally get to if you were in that state.
Gotcha. So,
and
Dr.
so
David,
it feels very much like you would feel if you were using one of those medicines.
Right. But
you're in control, so you can turn it on and off as you wish.
Right. But I guess, just playing devil's advocate, shouldn't you listen to your body? Like, so let's say, for example, I plan to do a workout today, and I really want to do the workout, but my body's actually telling me that I really don't want to do it. I'm really tired, and so I probably should just go and rest. But I'm like, okay, I'm going to use the Apollo. I'm going to choose the energize function, and I'm going to go hard. Isn't that sort of counterintuitive?
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the things that's critical to talk about, which is that Apollo can't force you or your body to enter a state that you do not want to enter. If your body is physically exhausted from intense workout the day before, or from an injury, or from an intense match the day before, in the example of sports, then, putting on the Apollo might accelerate your recovery, which we do see in elite athletes who have tested this, but it's not going to get you to a level of artificial energy where you're going to be able to go and really push it the next day to a degree where you're going to hurt yourself, I think that, or cause, some kind of issue. If you choose to do that, you choose to do that, but just like you do without Apollo. But what Apollo allows you to do is say you work out regularly and your body is normally in very physically good shape. And this is an example we see with the elite athletes a lot. But then you have a match on Friday. You've been working out and training for this match and you're in top physical shape and physically you feel great. But then Thursday night, you have a fight with your partner or you don't get good sleep because you accidentally drank too much. And so the next day you wake up and you're not at your peak recovery and ready to perform because psychologically or emotionally or mentally, you're not in the right mind state. And so what Apollo does is Apollo helps rebalance your body from the autonomic nervous system level, which tells you that you're safe and tells you that the psychological or mental stress that might impair physical performance or impair peak performance isn't actually a threat to you. And so your body recognizes that as a safety signal that allows you to adapt more effectively to stress. And once you experience that feeling, your body transitions more effectively into a peak physical performance state. But it's not going to be able to do that if you are physically exhausted. It's not going to, put you into a state that you couldn't or wouldn't be able to achieve by yourself. What we talk about it a lot with the meditation community and the physical athletics community is very similar, which is that it helps you recognize your actual human potential to be able to perform at your best in that specific setting. But it's not going to put you into an artificial state in any way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Apollo then, is it in a watch form only, or are there going to be other options?
So interestingly, there will be other options, and the reason we know that will be the case is because Apollo actually works. The frequency system that we figured out actually works almost anywhere on the body. In the current form, most people wear it on the ankle and the wrist just because of convenience, and because the effects in those locations are very good. And that said, there are people looking at implanting it in clothing and other areas on the body for different purposes. But I think that, in the first version that's being released currently, there will be ankle and wrist options. So depending on what your goal is, you can wear it in either place. Most athletes and most people who wear it for sleep tend to wear it on the ankle, get it out of the way of the hands. But it's really a personal preference thing.
Great. And I love that you've got the ankle option, because those of, the athletes out there that are already using things like the Apple Watch and the Whoop, then they can still use the Apollo at the same time, which is great. So would you recommend leaving it on 24/7 if you can?
So typically what most people who wear it use it for is that they wear it either predominantly during the day. We have a group of people who wears it during the day, all day, from the moment they wake up to the moment they fall asleep. And then there's another group of people who doesn't really wear it much during the day, but wears it all night to help them get to sleep and then wake up more energized in the morning with more restful sleep. And then there's a group in the middle that kind of wears it for both. In general, what I think we don't recommend that you have it on all the time, because the technology, the vibrations in our clinical trials we showed actually induces a change in the body within 3 minutes, which is very similar to the amount of time it takes for your body to enter an optimal balanced state when you deep breathe. It's usually about 3 minutes. And so for most people, they get the effect within 3 minutes, 5 minutes, sometimes quicker. And your body responds very, very quickly. And so if you use it for 5 or 10 minutes, the effects typically last for 30 minutes to 2 hours afterwards, which is about the duration of effect for human touch. So if you get a massage, for instance, for 15 minutes, or from somebody you like touches you or gives you a hug, then the benefits usually last for 30 minutes to 120 minutes. And that's that was based on how Apollo was built, was based on the theory of how touch affects the body. And so it's not necessary to have it on all the time vibrating, but we do recommend that people wear it all the time, because you can activate it as needed throughout the day.
And does Bluetooth need to be on in order for it to work?
No, so we actually designed the device to be independent, completely independent of the phone. And so that was one very important thing for us, because we want people to be able to access the data on their phone when they choose to use it, to look at the data or to change settings on the phone. But the data is really a nice to have. And the most important thing for us is that you have this device that you can use as conveniently as possible without a phone if you choose to. And so the device has the ability to turn it on or off without the phone. You can change the intensity levels without the phone. And it will also save all of your data to the device. And so you can basically schedule an entire day, for instance, on your phone, or you can schedule every day on your phone, and then it will save it to your firmware, so that once you get all set up, you don't need to go back to your phone at all to use the device unless you are tracking your data. So the Bluetooth is actually only active when your phone is directly open. The app on your phone is open, talking to the wearable. All other times the Bluetooth is off, and the frequencies that the wearable generates are actually generated right on the wearable itself, and they're sound wave frequencies. So they have almost the EMF on this device is extremely low, and that was designed on purpose due to a lot of the concerns that have been coming up.
That's great. And you mentioned before that I think in your second edition you're looking at sort of amalgamating or using being able to see the data from other devices like Aura. I assuming in the first edition that's not going to be the case, but you will have Apple Health Kit. Is that right?
Yeah. So the nice thing about Apollo, and I think this kind of ties into the way that our users will interact with it, is that it's a subscription model. So you purchase a membership to the app, and then you pay basically on a monthly basis, because the software is really where the magic happens. And as you use the app and as you use the hardware, it actually learns about you, and the software continuously upgrades based on your usership and based on what we learn about your day and your nights and your behavior and how you like to use it. And so over time, starting when the devices are first shipped in January, you won't have the data visualization feature, but within 3 to 6 months in 2020, what will happen is you won't have to upgrade your device at all. The software will update automatically, and as the software updates, if you're using one of those wearables and you give us permission to access your data, the data will be automatically imported into the Apollo app without having to change your hardware. And you'll be able to then get that added feature of showing how your data is tracking over time as you use the app, which is the first time that that's ever been a feature on any wearable, where you can actually see how an intervention or a therapy is improving your health and track it over time.
That's great. And so obviously you'll add all sorts of different things, and that'll be excellent. But I guess what I wanted to really get an understanding is like how does this really work? I mean, what's the science behind it? And you mentioned a couple of clinical trials that have been done. Can you give us a bit more information on that? Because it sounds a bit woo-woo to me, if I'm to be honest, like a little, sound or vibration on the wrist can actually change your mood. I sort of have looked into the science and believe it, but just for our listeners who aren't aware of the clinical trials, tell us more.
Yeah, so I think that it's important to note that this is while the Apollo version of what we're presenting to the world is brand new in its form factor and its delivery, the technology and the scientific theory for how this works is actually thousands of years old. And what it comes from is an understanding of how music changes our body. So you listen to music, and I'm sure that when you listen to music when you work out, it's very different than the music you listen to when you're meditating or falling asleep, right?
Absolutely.
And so there's a reason for that. And it's because the music you listen to has a rhythm when you're working out that is consistent with the speed that you want to be at, the energy level you want to be at when you're working out. And when you're sleeping or meditating, that music has a different rhythm, typically slower and softer. And so what we did is, actually our founding research team was all not only neuroscientists and psychiatrists and psychologists, but also musicians. And so, or people who had a music background or a great appreciation for music and the way that music changed the way we felt. And so understanding how music changed the way we felt, we started to be very interested in why that happened and how not that many people have spent time investigating it. So we started investigating it and doing a very, very broad literature review of the field. And we found that without a doubt, there are certain frequencies that of music that are well characterized, or sound that are well characterized when heard through the ears, or when they're applied to the skin, that reliably change these biological rhythms. For example, that change heart rate, and certain frequencies make heart rate go up, other frequencies make heart rate go down, and similarly with heart rate variability, similarly with respirations, and this is very well studied. What is not that well studied, that is truly unique about Apollo, is what happens when you apply these vibrations to the skin. And there are only a few studies that have really looked at applying these different frequencies of vibration to the skin. But the skin, in a lot of ways, is a sensory organ, just like the ears. What there is evidence for is that touch, soothing, gentle touch, evolutionarily and currently, is the most effective way that we have evolutionarily generated safety in our communities. When we are sitting close to a loved one, when a loved one gives us a hug or holds our hand, or even just makes close eye-to-eye contact with you and shows that they're listening to you undividedly, it conveys immediate safety signals to the brain that calms us down. And we've known this for a very long time, but we haven't really spent a lot of time exploring what happens to the body in those states, and then how to induce those states with technology that we have access to. And so during my research over the last 5 years, since about the end of 2013, beginning of 2014, this became something of interest to me, because these techniques like music and touch were so powerful at helping my patients who did not respond to any Western medicine or Western gold standard treatments. So when I saw the effects on them and nothing worked on them, I thought, this must be really powerful stuff. Maybe we should explore this more. And so after doing an enormous amount of literature review with a huge focus on biofeedback, which is the most traditional way that we've had to measure what happens to the body when you enter a deep breathing or meditative state that boosts heart rate variability, then we put all of that information together and figured out that there were very specific rhythms that you could deliver to the skin, that the skin receptors that are the same receptors that pick up the signals from somebody you like touching you get activated in the same way from these frequencies, and then send a signal to your brain that's interpreted by the emotional cortex as safety. And when that interpretation happens, then the brain can increase activity in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the system involved in resting, digesting, recovery, sleep, creativity, reproduction, all of those things that we do when we're feeling safe and thriving in our lives, and then redirect energy away from the threat response system or the sympathetic system that's fight or flight or freeze, that is active when we're running from a lion in the jungle, which most of the time we are not doing in our day-to-day lives. In modern times, usually it's an email or our kids screaming or a work issue or something like that sets us off. And that's not actually a threat to our survival. So what Apollo does is it's tapping into this evolutionarily conserved pathway of safety that can be activated by deep breathing or activated by touch or soothing music, but in a wearable that is completely passive, that can be turned on and activated without taking your attention away in your day-to-day. And that's what the very traditional Eastern meditators will tell you is true meditation. It's being present in your life, in every moment of your life, as often as possible, not just taking time away to sit and cross-legged and meditate, but to actually be present as often as possible in every moment of your waking, walking life. And that's what leads to the best results in terms of meditation affecting our lives. And so this recreates that effect for those who have not had the time to practice and master meditation or deep breathing, but over time also trains the nervous system to be in balance so that you can access meditative states and states of calm and balance on your own more effectively over time.
Yeah, that's actually one function that I'm really, really excited to try out, and I'm particularly interested in the study that you did with the EEG patterns. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. So this study was a really interesting study, and for us, because when we first developed this technology, we went around just trying it on everyone we knew to see what they would think and if we could replicate the effects. And ultimately, we were able to replicate the effects subjectively in everyone, and that we are almost everyone we tried it on, and that's why we ended up doing this double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled clinical trial, which showed that without a doubt, even though we're providing frequencies to people that they have no idea what they're supposed to do, and the researchers had no idea what the frequencies are supposed to do, or what frequencies the users were getting, that the subjects reliably improved heart rate variability, and their performance under a very stressful task improved with directly proportionate to how much their heart rate variability improved within 3 minutes. And so this was a really profound finding, and the reason for that is because that when we meditate, heart rate variability goes up. And when we enter states of deep breathing for, in a biofeedback setup for 90 seconds, 95% of us see a boost in heart rate variability that correlates directly with how calm we feel. And we saw those exact same changes with Apollo in a placebo-controlled trial. And so then we went and said, all right, if this is what we're seeing, what happens if we put Apollo on expert meditators? And so we went, because if this is true, what we should see is that expert meditators should reach deeper meditative states more quickly with Apollo than they do normally. And that's exactly what we saw in the wild, where we would meet our friends or meet people who were introduced to us by our friends, and they didn't know what Apollo did, and they were very skeptical often in the beginning, but they would put it on whether they were in a public place, in a bar, or in Silicon Valley somewhere at their office, and we'd put it on them, and they would tell us that they were having almost full-blown Kundalini experiences with Apollo within 12 minutes that would normally take them hours to reach without it. But that was, again, still just subjective reports. So we went back to the lab in 2017 and 2018, and we raised funding from the University of Pittsburgh to run a clinical trial that is still an analysis, but the preliminary results were showing that what we were looking at was to compare 25 naive, completely inexperienced meditators to 25 very experienced meditators and look at their brainwave patterns. And we know that people who are very experienced meditators change their brainwave signature within about 3 to 5 minutes. And you can see that reliably with a EEG brainwave scanner. However, when you take naive, inexperienced meditators and put them in the same situation with a 12-minute guided oral mindfulness protocol like Headspace or Calm or one of those kinds of things, almost none of the naive or inexperienced meditators are able to change their brainwave patterns in 12 minutes. On the average, what we see is that no one changes their brainwave patterns within 12 minutes. However, as soon as you apply Apollo in that same 12-minute period, along with the guided mindfulness protocol, all of the inexperienced and naive meditators' brainwave signatures change to look just like the experienced meditators' brainwave signatures. And the experienced meditators say that they are able, again, to reach deeper meditative states more quickly. And these are preliminary results because they haven't been completely sent through the rigorous, academic analysis that we're doing now and in the process of prior to publication in a peer-reviewed journal. But ultimately, these findings are the initial findings that we were looking for that showed without a doubt we are accelerating people's access to meditative and mindful states, and we're helping people who would normally struggle to enter meditative states to enter them more quickly. And the brainwave signatures are pretty consistently showing that.
That's really exciting to me. And Dr. David, you mentioned a couple of times that the AI is going to get better and better, and so that it's going to start to understand you and your patterns. Does that mean then that I won't actually have to press the button or choose something? It'll actually just kick in automatically?
Yeah, so that's the goal, right? The goal is that at some point in our lives that we will have AI that isn't just there to sell us things based on our data. It's there to understand our bodies and provide us with a improved user experience and improved health without us having to interact with the technology as much. And so that's really always been the goal with Apollo, because, just for instance, a lot of my patients that have mental illness like PTSD or depression, they don't necessarily know all the time when to turn it on. And particularly in addiction disorders, they don't necessarily know when they're going to be craving their next time that they use a drug. So if we can detect from their behavior on their phone or from their body biometrics when their body is showing signs of stress that would lead them to have a panic attack or a flashback or a craving to use a substance and relapse, then we can turn the frequencies on automatically. And calm you down so that you don't progress into that state. And in our preliminary trials, that's exactly what we've seen that we've been able to do, which is incredibly exciting because it really takes AI and technology into a new realm of how we can personalize medicine. That said, it's very important to note that the user will always have the ability to control whether the device is on or not, or whether it's in automatic mode or not. But I think for a lot of us who have very busy schedules, for me in particular, I would love to be able to schedule this thing to, turn on at very specific times of the day every day, because I always need it at certain times of the day when I'm doing stressful activities, and it helps me be better during those times. And it's the same for our whole team. And so what happens is, as you use the app and you schedule the app and you interact with it and let us know what you like more than other things, et cetera, then it will learn about what you like and when you like to use what you like, so that you, exactly as you said, you don't have to turn it on every time you want to use it. It will start to learn what you like and assist you when you need it without you having to do anything. And over time, the reason that AI is so interesting is because over time, the goal for the user is to rely on it less and less. So the less it turns on, the better you're doing. And so it's actually a very interesting training mechanism for helping restore the natural balance of the body that you can achieve on your own.
Excellent. So how do we get one?
So you can get an Apollo at apolloneuro.com for our special pre-order. So that's APOLLONEURO. And you can also go to apolloneuroscience.com and get to the same pre-order. And that will be available for a little bit longer. So please check it out. And we'd love to get you to have you and your listeners be some of our first.
Awesome. And so the delivery is in January. Is it to only people that live in the United States?
No, we actually have a huge contingent of people in the UK. I've had a lot of great contact with folks in the UK who have been very fascinated by this technology, in large part thanks to Tim Gray from the Health Optimization Summit and the Healthista folks over there. So we've had a lot of UK and EU attention, and I think the only caveat is that if you have the device shipped to your location, is that you have to pay the international shipping, unfortunately. But we priced it at a point that for pre-sale that's significantly discounted, so it's only $199. So for most people, the international shipping, isn't that bad. But we'll ship it anywhere.
And that $199 doesn't cover the monthly subscription, though, right?
Oh, it does.
It does.
So the $199 is a special pre-order price that gives you the hardware and a year's worth of monthly subscription that will continue at the lowest price after the year's up if you want to continue using it. So it's an all-inclusive special price. And that will be the cheapest it will ever be.
Awesome. Thank you. That's great. And is there anything else that you wanted to add that we perhaps didn't cover?
I think we covered most things. I think if you'd like to talk about the psychedelic study, we can. I think what's particularly interesting is that the way that psychedelic medicines in psychotherapy affect the body is that they induce in the psychotherapy setting, in the clinical setting, when these medicines are used, for example, in the Imperial College of London trials with psilocybin for depression, or in the MAPS phase 3 FDA trials with MDMA, these medicines work in the clinical setting because the clinical setting induces this safety experience that allows somebody to use a medicine that opens us up to catalyze change. By helping us amplify our sense of safety and our sense of self-efficacy and control and sense of self. And so Apollo is really developed based on the same principles, which is that it helps us recognize, by feeling safe, it helps us recognize our true potential and our strengths and our ability to feel our best at times where we might have previously felt threatened or unsafe. And so we're actually conducting this large-scale study now to look at the combined effects, not only of different psychedelic medicines in controlled settings like MDMA and psilocybin, but also comparing to people using Apollo to see if they're inducing the similar changes to the body to the DNA expression patterns of stress response genes, and also to, at some point, we'll be looking at neuroimaging patterns of brain pathways and neural networks. So it's really interesting to be able to be working in a space where now we actually have, through combination of Eastern and Western strategies for healing, we actually have the ability to make technology that can potentially induce very similar healing states to what some of these powerful psychedelic medicines are doing in session with therapists, but we can send you home with it and it's safe and has no side effects. So stay tuned over the next several years, and you will see the data pan out and to see how similar these things really are. And if you want to check out more about this study, you can look at modernspirit.org, which is the charity that's the main charity that's funding this in the US.
And Dr. David, are you working at all with John Hopkins and the 5-year psilocybin or testing that they're doing with or different addictions?
Yeah, so we don't have a solid commitment from them yet, but at this point I am in conversations with several folks who are working on that project to collect data from their patients before and after they go through those treatments.
Awesome.
So at this point, we have several groups that are contributing patient data to the study, but the goal is to include as many of the volunteers in the Hopkins program as possible.
Great. And one slight question I've got to ask you just before you go: do you have a tattoo?
I do not.
Just a question we ask all our guests on the show. Have you thought about it, or are you thinking maybe you'll just put the Apollo inside your skin and that'll be enough?
Oh, yeah. So like the electroconductive tattoos, you mean?
Exactly.
So I thought about getting a tattoo when I was a teenager in college. I did not, because ultimately I couldn't find anything that resonated with me enough over time to attach to my body. But no judgment on anybody else. I just couldn't find anything that stuck with me. I think that the future of those electrodermal tattoos are really fascinating, and it's going to be really interesting to see how those evolve over time. I think right now, part of the exciting thing about Apollo is how it's completely non-invasive. It's something that you can take on and take off and doesn't require implantation into the body. And that was a big focus for us, because a lot of the techniques that in the past have been used to induce similar effects to Apollo, like electrical stimulation or electrical vagal nerve implants and stimulators and things like that, are implanted, and it takes a lot. It makes it less accessible to people, right? Like if you have to go and get a special procedure done to have access to a benefit, then it makes it harder for people to access, and it costs more for people to get access to. And so in the future, down the road, who knows what will happen. I think what we're going to see before Apollo becomes implantable, and maybe Apollo will, maybe it won't. I think what we're going to see that's even more exciting than that is that the biometric sensors that we're using to measure the body become implantable, because those are things that can be put inside the skin or just under the skin that can continuously measure the state of our body over time and in real time. And then you wouldn't have to worry about taking it off or charging it like with with a ring or watch or whatever it is. You can kind of leave it there and continuously measure your body over time. And I think the future of that is extremely exciting. But we are going to be very, very happy to tie into those data sets when they start coming through.
Yeah, it's not far away, I don't think. Awesome. Look, thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it as well.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.